Thanks a lot, Kyle. Super excited to be here today. And we do have a pretty incredible panel, and it is a super hot topic, as they were talking about in the prior panel, the comment, there's a new energy around Bitcoin. Don't think anybody would disagree with that. But let's get right into it, because we got some really some incredible panelists here. We've got Rena Shah from Trust Machines. We've got Willem Schroé from Botanix Labs, which is one of the developers of a new L2 on Bitcoin. And we've got Dovey, founder of Primitive Ventures, who actually has been investing in a couple of these layer twos on Bitcoin in various ways. In fact, just for introduction, I thought maybe we could just go and kind of 1 minute each of y'all, and just say just a tiny bit about what your job is, but then like what your angle is on Bitcoin layer twos. Rena, you want to go first?
Cool. Hi, I'm Rena. I'm with Trust Machines. We build products directly on Bitcoin, both the L1 and the L2. We fundamentally believe that building on the L1 is sustainable in the short term, but the long run, the L2 is where more on-chain activity is going to go. That's how you're going to bring billions of users actually using Bitcoin in everyday life. We operate a Bitcoin wallet. It's called Leather. We are basically the gateway for people to come into Bitcoin and then kind of deploy as they see fit, whether it's NFTs, DeFi, ordinals, everything under the sun.
And I mean, Trust Machines, it's associated with this. I mean, you're one of the developers on Stacks, right?
We are a core contributor to the Stacks development. However, we contribute to other L2s as well. We're pretty layer agnostic, so we contribute directly on Lightning. We do have a swaps protocol. We work with RSK. We would love to explore other L2s. We're agnostic.
Okay, interesting. All right. And Willem, let's go to you. Tell us about Botanix.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Willem, founder of Botanix Labs. Very aligned on the vision. We try to think like if you imagine 100 years ahead and the whole world is running on Bitcoin, which infrastructure do you actually need? And we're trying to build an infrastructure where Bitcoin is reserve currency of the world, and Bitcoin is slow, 10-minute blocks, very limited amount of things you can do with it. And then we're building with Botanix a overlayer network to actually scale Bitcoin in a decentralized fashion. So we created a novel layer 2 design that's called Spider Chain. Spider Chain is capable to be fully decentralized in the sense that anyone will be able to run a full node. And that's, I believe, that's exactly what we need in the world. Like Bitcoin is extremely decentralized as pure money. With Botanix, we want to build this decentralized layer 2 fully running on Bitcoin that is capable to be run by every person in the world. I fully believe Bitcoin layer 2s is the way forward. There's a huge amount of capital, $1 trillion actually, that's waiting for activity to happen on Bitcoin. So I'm very excited that it's finally here.
And it's EVM compatible, right? That's one of the Spider Chain attributes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we are fully EVM equivalent, meaning you can copy paste any smart contract we have on Ethereum, deploy it on top of us, and the whole thing works. And so suddenly you can see any application. Like if I'm a developer and you have to think, do I deploy my Ethereum dApp on Ethereum, compete to all these other dApps, compete for the same TVL, compete for the same users, or do I deploy on Botanix and access the whole Bitcoin market? Suddenly the business case becomes very massive, huge amount of opportunity. There's a massive first mover advantage that's going to play out. And so, yeah, very excited to actually see a lot of Ethereum dApps and Ethereum developers or Solidity developers come back to Bitcoin.
Thank you, Willem. And Dovey, I mean, you have a different perspective as an investor looking at a lot of these projects, and also you have kind of probably more of an Asia focus. Let's hear about your angle on layer 2s.
Yeah, so I joined the industry as a Bitcoin rationalist back in the day. Like now it's my 10th year in the space, and so I remember like in like so in the 2014 cycle, and like we degen things like all the color point, right? And like every cycle is kind of same to me. It's like always like center around new things to trade or like new way to trade. So like NFT, so like NFT is kind of like a color point on steroid, and so it's just like more stuff like being just like set on the metadata. So when it comes to like Bitcoin layer 2, because we have been investing in a lot of just like layer 2 in general, or like rollups like Optimism, Starware, slash like StarNet, things like that. And like what we realize is like Bitcoin, like the whole Bitcoin ecosystem has a really good monetary gravity, right? So like it's becoming like the reserve currency, and then like even for like smaller central banks nowadays. And but the thing is that there's not much like monetary velocity like happening for the Bitcoin blockchain. And so just like follow what like Willem said before, right? And I think like the future is not just about hyper Bitcoinization as like a reserve currency, but like also also our mental model is like what is like the percent of like GDP, so like that's actually denominated by Bitcoin, right? And so if we want to facilitate that future, and so layer 2 is like definitely the way to go. But the definition of layer 2 can be tricky, right? So so layer 2 from just like technical perspective, like can be like a full spectrum. So there's like a true layer 2, there's like off-chain DA, and like there's a plasma, there's a state channel. So I think there's just like all different trade-off out there, and then depending on like what is your like design mechanism, and so what are the things that you want so like what are the things that you just like trade A with like B. But like at the end of the day, so we simply try to separate layer 1 versus layer 2, as in like the layer 1 is just like a database, and that does not depend on any other system for its validity, and it's basically like a single truth of so it's the single source of the single source of the truth, and also it's like the root of like, so it's also the root of the trust. And then when it comes to layer 2, and so all the layer 2 as of now like has the sole discretion, so to determine whether like the database is as safe and alive. And so layer 2 database and like has only liability, but has no but has no the actual asset ownership. But the thing is that like it will actually scale the Bitcoin on-chain monetary velocity like to another like 1,000 fold. And so yeah, so like we have been actively looking and investing.
Thank you, Dovey. Just to kind of get right into it, one of the questions that keeps coming up is whether we need changes to the Bitcoin core. I mean, this is such a controversial topic. Willem, one of your devs who works there at Botanix is behind this, proposal to bring back the OpCat, from the old days, and supposedly that would help, with some of this stuff. But I'm curious, is there any hope of getting any changes through the Bitcoin core? They were talking about BitVM on the previous session. That was kind of one of the breakthroughs there, is you don't have to change anything. But I don't know, Willem, what do you think? Is there any hope of getting some of these changes through to Bitcoin core, or is people just going to have to make do with Bitcoin as it is?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a very hot topic and very controversial in the Bitcoin space. There's pros and cons. I think OpCat was in Bitcoin before. OpCat can make a lot of different things. It's actually really, really powerful. Even though it's a super easy code, I think it's like a very, very small code base. But for example, like a BitVM becomes way, way easier with an OpCat. The reason it's controversial is because governance, or basically the CTV or the OpCat, which would limit where you can spend your Bitcoin, is still not fully very accepted in the Bitcoin world, because yeah, you can imagine a world where governments basically limit where you can spend your Bitcoin, and that's basically the controversial aspect. However, we need also really to think like, how actually are we gonna scale Bitcoin? Like, if Bitcoin actually becomes a currency of 7 billion people, of 8 billion people, then we cannot scale that. And so how are you actually going to do that? And so the whole Bitcoin community is very much looking like the best way to scale. I think there's no consensus yet, but there's a lot of very good proposals. And I think what Opcat has changed is like suddenly people are actually building with a lot of those soft forks, and we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, Opcat is very exciting. Yeah, I'm very proud that the CTO is at the forefront of that.
And Rena, I mean, obviously, Stacks and, some other L2s, Lightning, obviously, are currently operating, with the current setup. What do you think about this question of whether it's possible to change Bitcoin Core to make some of this stuff easier?
I think it's possible, and I think it's whether we should or if we shouldn't. Bitcoin is built to be simplistic and simple and a solid base foundation. I fundamentally believe that innovation should be on the L2 layer because you're not messing with the foundation of how you move money. The way I think about it is Bitcoin has already achieved store of value. It has not achieved medium of exchange. And if you want Bitcoin to be a medium exchange, I want to experiment on the L2 so I don't mess with the store of value on the L1. And so when it comes to Opcat, I actually think there's a lot of world of possibility where if you go with Opcat with BitVM, you can make an L2 from trust minimize fully to trustless, which is the route that Stacks is trained to go.
That's really interesting. Let's just to change the topic a little bit, because just to keep things moving here. Dovey, we were talking about before, kind of maybe a related topic. Should Bitcoin layer 2s have their own tokens? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is a very tricky question. And I think so I also tweet about this as well. And like, what is the definition of like being like a Bitcoin aligned, right? And so if you don't like as in layer 2, and if you don't have your token, and so then like what are the vehicle that can like capture the value? And but the thing is that once you have the token, like how you can Bitcoin aligned. And so that's why I like what I have seen in the market, so I think in the universe of like Ethereum, and like everything can be tokenized, and then so layer 2 is a really good narrative, like just to have like a useless like governance token, and just like with like ultra high FTV. And I think when it comes to like the Bitcoin world, and then we are much more reserved, and then like much more like rational and just like conservative, like when it comes to like hyper financialization. So I don't have a good answer yet, like whether like Bitcoin layer 2 should have their own token, because ideally speaking, so like Bitcoin should be the gas, right? And but like once that Bitcoin is the gas, and then what's the point of like having the token? Yeah, so I don't have like any good answer for that.
Could I maybe chime in?
Go ahead, Rena. Go ahead.
I think it comes like a Bitcoin L2 trilemma. There are multiple properties that a developer is going to want when building on Bitcoin. You want either an open network, you want token, no token, you can be in either camp, and then you want a full global VM. Typically, to scale, you can only get 2 out of 3. And so when I think about it, I think about generally Bitcoin is open, so you don't want a federation. So that's a checkbox that you want, and you want a full global VM. When it comes to a token, I think there is a world where a token is purely used as gas, because I can't see 20, 30 years from now, if you want Bitcoin to remain a high store of value, that gas price of using Bitcoin as the asset will be too expensive unless it's a high value settlement transaction. So I see value in a gas token for an L2 and let it be purely gas and nothing else.
And what about you, Willem? What do you think about this topic? I think maybe I'm trying to remember did you mention that you have a way of pegging over Bitcoin to some of your chains?
Yeah,
Or?
I have a little bit of different vision on that. I think longer term, there's always been one reserve currency in the world, and I think about human behaviors, and people are always very simplistic in their thinking, and if they're transacting in Bitcoin, they want to see Bitcoin as a gas fee. Like, it's very confusing if you don't know what exactly the gas fees are that you are like paying for. Like, do you need to like calculate yourself how you're using it? And so I feel like everything will go back to Bitcoin and using Bitcoin as the gas fees, and like it's just liquidity network effects. And that's basically what we're doing with Botanix. Like, the whole tech stack runs on Bitcoin, and I think longer term that will play out. Yeah, that's basically how I see the world 100 years from now. I think having the token in that protocol is more liability than really an asset in 100 years timeline. I really like to think very long term, and so in scaling Bitcoin, I think the first focus should be actually fully on Bitcoin, and I think it makes more sense from a human perspective.
You know, just in my newsletter yesterday, the protocol shout out. I published a schematic that River Financial had tweeted out, and it was fascinating. In fact, somebody else randomly, independently sent it to me in my Telegram channel, but it basically showed who owns all the Bitcoin in existence. And, you know, there's however many, you know, there is left to be mined. And it's a lot, you know, it's spoken for. And now there's all these new uses that are coming up. You know, there's ordinals, and there's runes is coming out. You know, there's all these layer 2s we're talking about. And, you know, the ETFs are buying Bitcoin. You know, I guess is how do layer 2s put an additional strain on that Bitcoin supply? And is that a problem? I don't know. Dovey, do you want to take this one?
But the question is like how the layer 2 gonna impact Bitcoin supply.
I guess, or is the Bitcoin supply sufficient?
Yeah. So like I can totally chime in on this one. So first of all, and I think a lot of like Bitcoin, just like Bitcoin founders working in like Bitcoin ecosystem, and so they all realize that most of these are ordinal and like BRC20 trading activities are primarily just like Asian market centric. So like that's why there's a lot of like push behind like this like Asian miners, because like they are one of like the biggest like beneficial like players in like the whole like ordinal craze and just like BRC20 craze, right? Like Bitcoin layer 2 as well, because like two of my Bitcoin layer 2 portfolios nowadays, so total, so they basically locked up almost like 2 billion in like TVL, and then like over half of those are like native Bitcoin, right? So I think like the more the more layer 2 we have, and then so like I said, layer 2 is like a gateway for the monetary velocity, and then also GDP generation of like on-chain Bitcoin activity. And like just like the more monetary velocity we have, and then so like the more productive like the underlying layer 1 Bitcoin gonna be. And then so like the incentive of all this LP, so why they want to lock their Bitcoin in all this like off-chain validating bridge of Bitcoin layer 2 is that so they want to get yield, right? And so like that's why I think it will have like a positive impact when it comes to like having lower supply, and then so we will have like more Bitcoin just a lockup for like long-term capital commitment for the layer 2, and so I'm actually pretty bullish on that. Yeah.
And Rena, what do you think about that topic? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin L2s will have an impact to ETFs similar on how ETFs had an impact on Bitcoin demand. L2s will increase demand for Bitcoin. Bitcoin deposit in L2s will surpass probably the total BTC held in ETFs for coming years, because once you go into an ETF and explore about investing in the asset for the first time, naturally what's going to progress is I want to do more, and that's where the L2s will be prominent.
Thank you. All right, we got 2 minutes left. Just, you know, Will, I'm curious. I mean, with the EVM compatibility, and if you watch what's happening in Ethereum and some of the other alt layer one ecosystems, and a lot of the emphasis is on the bridges and the interoperability. I'm curious, is Bitcoin gonna just connect with these other systems, or will they eventually become like L2s and L3s on top of Bitcoin? Like, how does Bitcoin fit together with all the rest of everything, if you see that happening?
Yeah, very good question. I think Bitcoin will increase massively in terms of utility. Like Rena said earlier, now it's been a store of value and there's almost no utility, which is completely different compared to like when you look at an Ethereum. There's a huge amount of utility that's accruing back to Ethereum as an asset, and that will start happening on Bitcoin now as well. I said a little bit earlier, if I'm an Ethereum developer, if I have an Ethereum dApp, the same smart contract code, do I deploy it on Ethereum, compete in a very crowded market, or do I access and deploy it on Bitcoin natively, which is something you can do with Botanix now? You can take exactly the same smart contract code, but now access $1 trillion market of sleeping capital. There's $1 trillion market of capital waiting to be deployed. There's people who want to use it, but there's nothing there. There's very little utility, and you cannot really do a lot with your Bitcoin today. And that is about to change in the next year. Now, suddenly you can start using any of the applications, any of the utility that you actually see on Ethereum, and natively do it on Bitcoin. And that will be a massive game changer. This will transition Bitcoin from being a store of value to actually becoming the bedrock of a financial system, to become the asset where the world runs on.
You finished right on time, Willem, and that wraps it up. I feel like we could keep going on this topic for another hour, but just thank you to the panelists, Rena, Dovey, and Willem. Thank you so much, and thank you to the conference.